And are we recording?
Recording is started and we're live on YouTube.
Buenas tardes y gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde. Hay traducción en español disponible. Para acceder al canal en español, vaya a la selección por debajo de su pantalla por la derecha. Elige el icono del globo mundial y seleccione español. Si tiene alguna pregunta, escriba su pregunta en el chat o utilice la función de levantar la mano por debajo de su pantalla. Durante las actividades de grupos pequeños, por favor regresen a la sala principal para la charla traducida en español. Gracias.
Good evening. In addition to Spanish, we also have ASL interpretation. Commissioner Wiley, and welcome. Would you like to offer an opening welcoming statement?
Yes, I will. Thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us tonight in our sixth and final listening session. We're very glad that you're going to provide us with some input tonight. And we're glad that Commissioner Dick Scouten is also joining us. Chair Catherine Harrington will be joining us later as she is in another Zoom meeting at the time. Back in June, the chair brought forward a proposal to the full board to consider fully funding the body-worn cameras for our Sheriff's Patrol deputies. Within 24 hours, we'd heard loud and clear that the community was not necessarily in agreement with this as regarding a public safety tool. So as an agency, the county moved quickly to provide 6 public listening sessions to allow the community to share their thoughts and concerns. And this is the 6th of those sessions. On September 22nd, in a couple of weeks, the board will receive a report from our community-based consultants, which will reflect all of the voices that we have heard from these 6 conversations. And on September 29th, the board will decide whether to move ahead with this funding proposal or not. So we thank you for coming tonight, and we certainly appreciate the time, and we value the input that we receive from these listening sessions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Commissioner, and thank you for holding these sessions. For those of you who just joined, I'd like to ask the interpreter one more time to provide the community information about how to access the Spanish interpretation. I'd like to ask the interpreter one more time to offer information about how to access the Spanish language interpretation. You may be on mute.
I was. Gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde. Hay traducción en español disponible. Para acceder al canal en español, va a la selección por debajo de su pantalla por la derecha. Elige el globo mundial y seleccione español. Si tiene alguna pregunta, escriba su pregunta en el chat o utilice la función de levantar la mano por debajo de su pantalla. Durante las actividades de grupos pequeños, por favor regresen a la sala principal para la charla traducida en español. Gracias.
Thank you. And again, we also have ASL interpretation available. I'm Jake Cornett, the Executive Director and CEO of Disability Rights Oregon. I'm here today to help facilitate today's conversation. Disability Rights Oregon is the federally mandated protection and advocacy system for the state. In that role, we provide legally based advocacy to people with disabilities across Oregon, including right here in Washington County. A few quick reminders for folks of the agreements. And now you may have seen these as you waited to join the listening session in the PowerPoint slides that were scrolling by. First of all, please stay engaged. Zoom meetings are really hard, so please do your best to bring your whole self to this session. Second, speak your truth responsibly. Try to avoid generalizations. Share your experience, your ideas. Third, listen to understand. Avoid the tendency to debate. Be curious about what's been said by others. Fourth, be willing to do things differently and experience some discomfort, because this is some hard stuff. And lastly, expect and accept non-closure. shine lights on problems, but don't expect to solve the problem today. And I also want to add, please step back and step forward. If you're typically outspoken, step back and pause for others. If you're typically reserved, step forward and assert your opinion. If you do not identify as a person with a disability, please hold your comments until those community members have had an opportunity to share. Keep your comments brief as you can. Allow time for others to speak. And if you've spoken at more than one of these listening sessions, this being the 6th, hang back to let some others have their voice heard. I also want to make clear that this is a listening session. The commissioners are here to listen, and they want your feedback on issues that are most important to you. Instead of asking them what they will do, tell them what you'd like to see them do. This is not a question and answer where you'll get an immediate answer to your questions, but please know we're tracking everything, and if there are specific questions, county staff will follow up after the session. Now, one of the main reasons for the listening session is to get feedback from residents about the question of body-worn cameras. The killing of George Floyd prompted a lot of activity from the county commissioners, and I'd like to ask the county staff to share the timeline slides that you may have noticed in the looping PowerPoint when we were gathering earlier. These slides show what happened since that tragedy unfolded, including a statement from the board, some community organization meetings, and a series of listening sessions, this being the 6th. The sheriff has publicly supported these listening sessions, and he offers a few key pieces of information on body-worn cameras that will be shared in the chat, including a link to the current policy on body-worn cameras, a link to body-worn cameras frequently asked questions document, and a link to fact sheets on body-worn cameras. Now, keep in mind that the Board of County Commissioners does not have policy control over the sheriff, only annual budgetary control. That said, if you have an opinion about whether or not the commissioners should have more or less authority over public safety policy, please feel free to express that. Now, I'd like to ask the interpreter just one more time to provide the community information about how to access the Spanish interpretation.
Buenas tardes, gracias por acompañarnos esta tarde. Si gustaría atender esta cita en español, hay traducción en español disponible. Para acceder al canal en español, vaya a selección por debajo de su pantalla, por la derecha. Elige el icono del globo mundial y seleccione español. Si tiene alguna pregunta, escriba su pregunta en el chat o utilice la función de levantar la mano por debajo de su pantalla. Durante las actividades del grupo pequeño, por favor regresen a la sala principal para la charla traducida en español. Gracias.
Thank you. Now, lastly, for some shared understanding, I'd like to say something about the county's role as a governmental body. Now, county government should serve as the safety nets for our communities. Here in Washington County, programs range from health and human service programs to everything, includes everything from public health, women, infants, and children, or WIC, and programs for veterans. The county houses a collaborative library service effort in partnership with the cities. The county also has a variety of programs, including the Sheriff's Office, Community Corrections, and Juvenile Justice. As mentioned previously, the county board does not have any policy or programmatic oversight of the sheriff, who is independently elected. The board does, however, have oversight of the sheriff's annual budget, which is adopted in late June of each year, just before the start of the new fiscal calendar year on July 1st. Now, with the county commissioners present, this is an official public meeting. Everything in the main room, that's the room you're in right now, is recorded, and contact information of individuals who communicate, whether by speaking or in the chat room, will be included as part of the county's public record. There will also be breakout rooms that are not recorded, and no commissioners will be present. However, By joining this session, your comments, whether spoken or in the chat rooms, are essentially public. They just won't be part of the county's official public records if you're in one of the breakout rooms. Only the main room will include ASL and Spanish interpretation. Now, during today's meeting, we ask that you mute yourself when you're not speaking. If you want to speak, physically raise your hand or use your hand raise feature found when clicking on the participant list. If you're not able to raise your hand, just speak up and unmute yourself. Use the chat room if you prefer to make comments there. It's a great alternative. Well, one of the primary reasons for this listening session is to discuss law enforcement's use of body-worn cameras. So while we're all in the room together, we're going to ask a couple of anonymous polling questions to get your quick feedback. We know everyone has a different understanding of body-worn cameras, and we're not expecting you to be an expert to answer these questions. There are no wrong answers. If there's time, we may ask the same questions at the end of the session to see if the conversations changed in any way what your response is. If you're using the audio feature only by calling from your phone or watching on the county's YouTube channel, you will not see the poll. So, unfortunately, you won't be able to participate in the poll. Those using a computer or a smartphone should see the poll pop up, both in English and in Spanish, in just a moment. Could I ask the county staff, would you please share the first polling question? Thank you. I'm going to go ahead and read it out loud. How do you feel about equipping all law enforcement with body-worn cameras? Your options are strongly agree, agree, not sure, disagree, or strongly disagree. Just going to allow for a minute for the polling results to come in. I'm seeing the number creep up slowly, but I think we're about ready to close the poll. All right, here's what the results were. We saw 27% strongly agree and 33% strongly disagree, and about an equal share right in the middle of 13% ranging from agree, not sure, and disagree. Interesting results. County staff, would you please share the second question now? Now, the questions is, I believe body-worn cameras, and you should select which option you agree with. The options are intrude upon the privacy rights of residents, promote accountability and transparency to the public, and serve in training and evaluation of personnel, help provide compelling evidence in criminal prosecution, unnecessary increase on the police budget, require trust in the police to turn on camera when engaging with the community, or lastly, can produce video that is edited to misrepresent or distort the situation being filmed. Just gonna wait a minute to let the results come in. These questions are a little bit longer than the first bunch. All right, let's go ahead and close the poll. Interesting results again. A large percent of folks said that body-worn cameras, they believe that body-worn cameras require trust in the police to turn on the camera when engaging with the community. And let's see, we can scroll down. So about 75% of respondents said that. A pretty high percentage among the folks who participated in the poll. Thank you. Now, before we transition to the breakout rooms, does anyone have any comments they'd like to share that came up for you as a result of these polling questions? And I would remind you all again about the step up and step back concept. If you're someone who oftentimes speak up, please hang back and let others have an opportunity to have their voice heard.
I just want to say hello. This is Chair Catherine Harrington. I've joined the listening session. Sorry, I was late with another meeting.
Welcome, Chair Harrington. So, Chair Harrington, we just launched the 2 polls and are sharing the results, and you have Commissioner Schouten and Commissioner Willie on.
Great, welcome, Chair. Again, before we transition to the breakout rooms, does anyone have a comment that they'd like to share that came up for you as a result of these polling questions?
My name is John Mackey. I'll share something.
Go ahead, John.
Thank you. At the front end, I'll be brief with this, but at the very front end, I'll just describe the type of guy I am so that I don't look like, oh, he's just one of those. You know, I'm a 55-year-old guy, and I've done 21 years of military service. I'm a former state licensed foster parent that adopted the children. I have very low trust in law enforcement to do the right thing. I've just seen too many times where they will cover their fanny before they'll do the right thing because they don't want to risk. So I would have questions if officers will turn the cameras on when they should. Anyway, that's my first comment anyway. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, John, for sharing your thoughts. Is there a comment or thought from anyone else before we transition into the breakout rooms?
I'm not sure if I can be heard or not.
Go ahead. Can you tell us your name before you get started on your comments?
Yes, my name is Susan Nolte.
Go ahead,
and
Susan.
I had trouble with my audio, so I'm not sure that I understand whether those 2 polls allowed for more than one choice in terms of the answers, because I think more than one comment is true, or I feel is true and is applicable about the use of body cameras. A, that they could provide valuable evidence, that sometimes they don't get turned on, and B, and lastly, that there is some level of distrust that they won't get turned on. So I feel that all of those are equally true.
All right, thank you for your comment, Susan. I'll work to get you the answer, or if one of the county staff knows if more than one of those polling options was available to be clicked, go ahead and chime in.
Sure. The first poll was you were only able to choose a singular choice, but the second poll that had several different options was a multi-answer poll. So you could select multiple there. So if we have time at the end and we are able to launch that poll again, you can select multiple answers.
Okay, the numbers would bear out what you said.
Well, thanks, Susan, for your great question. And of course, you can always offer your thoughts in the chat box as well. And when we transition into the breakout rooms, you can do that there as well. Let's go ahead.
Can I do a quick statement just so it's on the record?
Go ahead, Sarah.
Thank you. My name is Sarah Deneen. I reside in Hillsborough. I am a white woman, and I am an educator who works with children with special needs. Something that I just would like to be on the record as part of this discussion, or just part of the record, so everybody's kind of understanding this. In reading through Washington County Sheriff's Office's information sheet they gave about body-worn cameras, what the purpose behind the body-worn cameras is, because I think that there's a narrative that it is about public safety, but in their objectives for their BWC program, they list promoting officer safety, recording certain activities, and creating a visual and audio record to supplement a deputy's report, enhancing the deputy's ability to document and view statements, preserving visual and audio information for use in current and future investigations, providing an impartial measurement for self-critique and field evaluation, and then lastly, enhancing public trust by preserving factual representations of deputy interactions with the community in the form of video and audio recordings. So just putting it out there that for what the sheriff's office is framing it as, public safety is not even on there, or people's concerns about police officers' interactions with the public and protecting the actual public is not on there. It seems to be about protecting officers and providing some kind of record for like legal action or whatever. So I just wanted that on the record. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Sarah. And you'll have an opportunity to say lots more about that during the breakout sessions. Well, thank you. We're gonna go ahead and...
Oh, I've had my hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Mariah. I didn't see that.
That's okay. Thank you. My name is Mariah. My pronouns are she, her. I've lived in Washington County for the last, 4 years or so, and I am a professional who works with people with disabilities. I just wanted to express concern about the way this conversation is being framed in the wake of the George Floyd's murder and the uprisings in response to it, particularly because the Black leadership in our community and our countrywide has made it pretty clear that our objective is to defund the police, that to get to the root of the systemic racism that we deal with that is inherent in policing, that we need to divest funds away from policing and into our community. And starting this conversation off of should we have police wear body-worn cameras or not, also known as should we give more money to the police to meet these objectives that really have nothing to do with keeping the community safe, we're starting off way on the wrong foot. And I'm really disappointed with how this conversation is being framed.
All right, thank you for your comments, Mariah. We're gonna go ahead and transition now into the breakout rooms where you'll have an opportunity to say lots more and share your perspectives, and that will be reflected back in the larger group. So we're going to bring the breakout rooms back at 7:05. And for a brief recap and closing remarks at that time, to make this go as smoothly as possible, everyone is going to be assigned to a breakout room. This will happen automatically, so you don't need to do anything. The exception is that the county commissioners who are going to remain in the main room to discuss further the topic of body-worn cameras. And if there's time remaining, other topics of interest to the group. Once you're in the breakout room, you've got a couple of choices. First, I want to remind folks, only the main room will include ASL and Spanish interpretation. So if you need these interpretation services, simply click the Leave button at the bottom of your screen and it will bring you back to the main room where interpretation is available. If you'd prefer to be with the county commissioners, simply click that Leave button and you'll be brought back to the main room. If you choose this option, you'll remain in the main room since you don't have the ability to go back and forth between the two. You can also remain in the breakout room for as long as you'd like before clicking the Leave button and returning to the main room, including the whole time that the breakout session is open. And lastly, if you're real tech savvy, unlike me, you can be in a breakout room and access the county's YouTube channel, which will be broadcasting the activities of the main room. This link for the channel will be posted in each breakout room chat area. Now, any questions before we send everyone to the breakout rooms about how that's going to work?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I'm a little confused. So if we go to the commissioners session.
Listening session.
Excuse me. The topic of today's listening session is people with disabilities, not body cameras. We already voted on body cameras, and I understand we're going to vote again on body cameras. And there's a lot of information and messages and comments in the chat room. So I want to talk or speak with the commissioners about people with disabilities. That is the topic for this evening.
Thank you for sharing your perspective, Karen. The topic is, I would suggest you're welcome to, if you get randomly put into the other breakout room, you can go ahead and click leave and rejoin the commissioners, where we'll start out the conversation with a focus on what people with disabilities think about the body-worn cameras and the unique issues there. And then we'll get to other topics if time allows. So thanks so much, Karen. Any other questions about that? About just the logistics of how this will move? All right.
Jake, this is Glenn in the chat room. I'm seeing on the chat, a person has pointed out with some accuracy that about half of the people participating tonight are actual residents of Washington County wanting to be heard in this listening session. We want to make sure that we have a rich discussion, and we don't want to spread people too thinly in multiple breakout rooms. We have another poll to offer. If folks want to stay in the main room and not be broken out into multiple breakout rooms, we'd like to just get the opportunity for people to weigh in on that. If there's anyone who wants to be in a breakout room, we will definitely include one. But if everybody feels comfortable being in the main room, we will remain in the main room and have one conversation.
Thanks for hopping in, Glenn. I can't see how many participants there are, so that's really helpful. Just going to go ahead and, for folks listening, we're waiting for the poll results to come in.
And as I'm watching poll results come in, it does look like we do have a few folks who want to be placed into the breakout room. So perhaps we should open up a breakout room, go ahead and just automatically sort folks. And then for anyone who wants to join the main session, you can go ahead and leave that breakout room and come back.
That works. Thank you for that, Highland.
All right, thank you. We'll go ahead and get that underway then.
Okay, just give me 1 second to set that up for us.
For folks listening over audio only, we're just in the process of moving folks into the breakout room. So please bear with us. All right, it looks like that little process is complete. We'll just give it just a moment more since we're in the main room to see if anyone would like to rejoin us who was placed into the breakout room. right. Well, I'm not seeing I finally figured out how to see the participants. So I'm not seeing the number change. So let's go ahead and get started. Well, welcome back, or welcome, I guess, if you stayed here. I want to just remind folks to please remain muted unless you wish to speak. The chat room is available for questions or written comments. You're welcome to use that. There will be a chat room monitor working to address any questions or comments as time permits. And we'll follow up after the session on all the questions for which there wasn't time to adequately address. Now we're going to open up the conversation regarding body-worn cameras first, utilizing what feedback was gleaned from those polling questions. So I'd really love to, and I also want to acknowledge, let's see, my co-facilitator. Where are you on the screen? There you are. Hello, Adele. Nice to see you. Adele is here to help me facilitate today's conversation during the breakout session. So thank you, Adele. Really appreciate that. So I thought I'd get us started by digging into those kind of quick poll questions that came up. When folks were responding to that first question, how do you feel about equipping all law enforcement with body-worn cameras? I really would love to hear what is the perspective of people with disabilities and with lived experience in thinking about that question and answering it. If folks want to offer their insights.
Really quickly, I don't have any insights to offer right now, but Karen, who spoke up before we broke out into the breakout rooms, says she needs help getting back in. So wondering if one of the facilitators here could get Karen back into the main room.
I'll ask the county staff if that can be worked out.
Thank you for speaking up on that, Pedro. I was wondering where Karen was.
I will reach out to her breakout room facilitator. The breakout rooms are a little wonky in that they don't allow me to move people back to the main session. I can only assign people from the main session to a breakout room. But I will reach out to that room facilitator and try to get Karen some help.
All right, while you work on that, any thoughts or considerations about how body-worn cameras impact how people with disabilities interact with the police department or the sheriff's office?
So
let's go ahead, Adele.
If you're a person with a disability who's here tonight, is there a particular perspective that you have around body-worn cameras?
This is Susan Nolte. May I speak?
Yes, please.
I don't have an official disability, but I am the parent of an adult with a disability, and she is terrified of cameras. She does not like to have her picture taken, and she's terrified of policemen. So the double whammy of a cop with body camera, I think, would be quite overwhelming for her. And she's had some very negative interactions with the police in her teens. She is on the autistic spectrum and has a mental health diagnosis. And so the training of the police involved was woefully inadequate. So it was, of course, a stressful episode for her. So fast forwarding to the present, I don't think a cop with a body camera that wasn't trained in interacting with someone with a disability, I don't think it would be an asset. I don't think that would facilitate the exchange at all.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing and from your experience with your daughter. Is there anyone else who's a person with a disability or representing people with disabilities?
what were folks hoping to?
Will the facilitators be sharing with everyone what's been contributed on the chat?
We will. We're just looking at this right now. Thank you. Mhm.
Maybe
Go.
Adele, while you look at that, I'll ask another question.
Perfect.
Thank you. What were folks on today's meeting hoping to learn about body-worn cameras, or to share their perspective about body-worn cameras?
And actually, probably Jake, in response to that, the comment that is made in the chat was a resident of Hillsborough who's a person living with emotional and mental challenges, and is talking about an experience of being assaulted by a police officer in the throes of a mental health crisis, and so she's saying that she would believe that it would have been helpful for the officer to have worn a camera, so that it would have documented what had took place.
So really getting at the kind of accountability piece there for having kind of proof of what happened.
Right.
Does that comment really resonate with anyone else?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Sarah.
I do not have a disability myself. I do work with disabled children. I think my concern about related specifically to that is about body cameras is that we have seen instances of body cameras documenting interactions with the police where the police were aggressive or harmful or whatnot, but that doesn't necessarily have had an actionable effect on changing behaviors on the behalf of the police, or actually creating accountability for those police officers in terms of actionable steps taken by policing systems to discipline, fire, legal action, those kind of things. So I just don't see how having it on camera necessarily adds in accountability when we see instances across the country where it hasn't. There hasn't been actual accountability and change and discipline to change behaviors. Thank you.
Thanks for sharing that, Sarah. I wonder if you'd expand on what you've seen interactions at the school you work at to be with sheriffs or police locally.
I mean, I work with very young children. We have had a couple of instances where we're located does tend to bring foot traffic that that people who maybe have mental health challenges or are under the influence have been around our building or actually come into our building. And so police officers have been called a couple of times to address issues. I don't know if they made like a noticeable difference. I've actually de-escalated a couple of situations in my building just by approaching somebody and asking what they needed and trying to ascertain what was going on and being able to escort them off the property myself. And I do have concerns of if police can escalate situations, and not just to say that police escalate situations, but police escalate other people's feelings, which could escalate the situation. If somebody is feeling emotional because of the police coming in, and I have concerns of that actually escalating situations around the students that we serve. And so if there are situations where, like I said, I'm a very small woman, I'm, 5'2", very tiny. I've been able to de-escalate situations pretty readily because of the way I approach it, and just kind of helping assist that person in getting what they need and leaving the building. And so and I'm not trained in any way, but I think, I as just a citizen, untrained citizen, am able to de-escalate things pretty readily. It seems unfortunate that police officers who do have training aren't always able to do that.
Well, thanks for sharing that perspective, Sarah. As a former special educator myself, I think we all have a little training in de-escalation from our school management, if nothing else. So thanks, Sarah.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any other comments in the chat box? Or, I'm sorry, Adele, looked like you were going to speak.
There are. Yeah, you read my mind there. There is another comment, and it's a response from to the conversation we've been having from the same person who wrote something earlier, wanting to say that that kind of the importance of body-worn cameras might be that it's important for someone who chose to go to trial and defend themselves to have the evidence to contradict what the police officers claim transpired. And that would take out that issue of it being, this person said versus what actually happened.
Excuse me, Board Chair Harrington, could you please ask the facilitator to go over the other comments that were also made in the chat?
Sure.
Adele, do you want to go ahead and?
I'd be happy to do that. Sure. And so there was a comment about defunding and what that means. So it's about defunding the police. And let's see. And there's a spectrum of interpretations about what defunding the police means. I think though, on the topic of body-worn cameras, there was an affirmation for that they do not always serve as they don't serve as a deterrent. There's some a link to. There's a quote here that says, although officers and citizens are generally supportive of body-worn cameras have not statistically significant or consistent effects on the measures for officer and citizen behavior or citizen views of the police. And there's a link to support that. And then several affirmations of that, and an affirmation of Sarah's work de-escalating without a gun. And let's see. And then there's a response to that, the comment in support of body-worn cameras that says that that it's possible that also the police can say that something happened off screen. If someone was using a film as justification for their case, they could the response could be that something happened off screen that wasn't caught on camera. So, and then a closing comment that regarding this personal situation, and that there was no de-escalation.
Thank you for that, Adele. I'm curious to hear from the group. With Disability Rights Oregon, we work with a lot of clients who have mental illness and may be in crisis, and having law enforcement show up to a crisis situation is not uncommon. I'm really curious to hear from the group how that kind of situation intersects with the concept of sheriffs wearing body-worn cameras, if there's any thoughts from the residents here who wanted to weigh in on that perspective. All right.
Well, so I'm trying not to speak too much and allowing, that step back, whatever, but if nobody else wants to share, you saying that, like, it literally made my heart rate like start to like go faster, the idea of police responding to somebody in a mental health crisis, because we've seen so many instances where that is escalated, and if somebody is not necessarily fully tethered to reality at that moment, able to listen and follow directions, able to, you know, respond to commands, able to, um, you know, control themselves. You know, I think there's a very real fear, and we see it play out in stories across the United States of people in mental health crises who are then harmed by the police because they are not trained. They're not the appropriate person to address a mental health crisis. And I don't know how having body cameras is going to change that. I think that, you know, like what Barbara said, and I want to recognize like that, you know, her validity of what, like, she had an interaction and she felt that having you know, video evidence of that interaction would have assisted with things, and I want to validate that. But I also want to bring up the fact that it doesn't change the harm. It possibly might change the outcome, although I don't think that plays out in historically in court systems, you know, in police discipline and all of that we've seen since, you know, body cameras have become common. But so it potentially might like change like that outcome at the end of like where there's some kind of disciplinary action or ability to take legal action against you know, a police officer that did harm, but it doesn't change that interaction. So I think that's like, again, like what Mariah had said before, like the framing of this conversation is wrong in that like the question, you know, the concern within the disabled community is that the actual, like, more contact with police potentially creates harm. So having that video is not going to change that harm. It may change something after the fact, but it's not going to change that harm. And I know that's not necessarily the conversation we're having today, but it just feels like this frustration of like, well, it doesn't matter if they're wearing a camera if harm is caused. So anyways, thank you.
Thanks for that comment, Sarah. I wonder if others kind of want to react or reinforce or weigh in to what Sarah just talked about, kind of this interaction of law enforcement with people with disabilities, and pick up on that thread at all. And I'll just kind of remind folks as you're thinking about whether or not you want to speak up, this is a great opportunity for you, for your commissioners to hear directly from you about this issue. So please use it.
Thank you, Sarah, for all of your testimony today. And I really appreciate your vantage point. And I also want to uplift what Karen said before the breakout room, how like this is not like the topic is not body worn camera. The topic is people's living with disability. And I understand that this is a listening session, but it doesn't make sense to keep stating these opinions that keep coming up. And to just have the conversation carry on with this narrow scope on body cameras, and then to wait until September 29th to get a response or even some dialogue from the Board of Commissioners, because it just doesn't make sense to keep talking and wait another month and a half to hear anything. So if this was to truly be like to have framed this conversation better, I would think that after the first, second, or third listening session where these issues were addressed, that the Board of Commissioners would have done their job and reflected on this and then developed a different scope, or like, you know, try to pinpoint a question differently and like change this over. But instead we're here on the last listening session, focusing on body-worn cameras, but specifically addressing this demographic of people living with disabilities. And it just really gives off the impression that I think Rena's been trying to drive home, that like these issues have been addressed and the board hasn't brought up any like substantial conversation surrounding this, but instead you're like, we want to listen about body cameras. And this isn't a listening session. We're just like speaking out into the void, and luckily it's on YouTube. And I think we're getting under your skin a little bit, but like as it should, because this is irritating all of us who like live with police violence in the day-to-day. Like body cams didn't do anything about George Floyd's killing. Every time people whip out their cameras to film a police officer, like Sarah says, doesn't change the fact that harm was done. In Miami, the police officer, there's an incident where the police officer went to address an incident with someone with autism in the streets and shoots their unarmed Black health worker, and that's ridiculous. And I understand that's Miami, East Coast, different country, and like we like to say that all of our police departments are like segmented into county and cities, but at the end of the day they all have guns. At the end of the day they all have the same racist history, and at the end of the day they all have like the entire apparatus of the state and the city government and county governments like defending them and having these pointless conversations, because this is no different than any of the other mediocre reforms that we've talked about in the last generations of trying to reform the police, and we're tired of it. You keep saying you don't have any policy. Thank you, Captain Harrington, for filing your paperwork at this time. But you say you don't have any like policy coverage on the police, but you give them all their money, and we're trying to like just talk about defunding the police a little bit, yeah?
So yeah.
Go ahead,
Pedro, yeah, Pedro, thank you. I can hear the the passion and the intensity around in your voice, and I want to acknowledge that. And I think that what I'm picking up is that you've been in 4 sessions now, and so you've been voicing something over repeatedly, and so I can understand your frustration because you're ready to hear an answer. The way the process was set up, and so I want to acknowledge that, because that's really real, and you do deserve an answer in a conversation. The way the process was set up was the thought was there would be these multiple listening sessions, probably with unique affinity groups in a way to answer those questions, so that in a way to collect the information, so that there could be an active response to a whole body of the community. So I want to acknowledge that the intent there really was to listen and respond. But for you, because you've been able to attend all, it's aggravating because it's over and over, you're hearing the same thing. What I would like to do maybe with the questions, because we really have gotten a good sense of what's in the room, is, and this is another opportunity to be heard, is say, what would you like? I'm hearing a pretty broad response that I think we're hearing, that body worn cameras, there's some real concerns on this. I even see this with Barbara, I think I got this right because I'm skimming while I'm listening. Your response that cameras are only as effective as the way they're used. So you said that they could be turned off, and acknowledge in more cases, talking about Alberto Molina and being filmed. There's cases that saying comments, again, I'm seeing these and listening. But what I want to know or hear from you is, what would you like to see happen? And this is a great opportunity to be heard on that too. So, and that's open to anyone.
I just want to reiterate what Mariah explained in the chat really well. I think the frustration is not because we're not getting an answer. The frustration is because the Board of Commissioners has chosen their answer and are pretending to listen after the fact. It's pretty clear what they intend to do, and that anything we share is they're just going to pick out the parts that favor body-worn cameras, which is why many of us are here feeling really frustrated.
So you're feeling, so the concern is that maybe you're speaking to something that's not going to be responded to. Okay.
Yes, which is why I jumped on the mic to ask Chair Harrington to ask you to address the other comments in the chat, because it was very quick from that one comment dropping in the chat about body-worn cameras and a favorable opinion, and the chair coming on to asking you to read it. So not to not address you in the room, but to address her specifically for her reflexes there. And even in the timeline, that was very telling in the beginning after the George Floyd's killing, the reflex there was to get body-worn cameras. And like, we understand that like we're not all on the same page here, and we're all here doing like some of that like public education, because like that reflex is a bad reflex. If your first thought was like, a Black man just got lynched, let's get body worn cameras so we can get the lynching on tape, like that's a bad reflex, and we need to push past that and get onto these issues like defunding the police, funding public services, funding mental health aid. Like, I would love to see $10 million defunded from the Washington County's Sheriff's Office and put into a Kahoot style program or a Portland street response style program to cover all of the county. That would be like a wonderful first step for that. And then everything else the Reimagine Oregon has said, and remove the SROs from our schools, remove the sheriff from the Reimagine as the liaison for the Reimagine proposals. Yeah.
Great. So yeah, thank you for those suggestions. And I see, and because that is what we want to hear. I mean, this is about hearing and listening. And so, and I also am seeing, you know, again, you said, so no cops in the schools, invest in community. So taking those funds and really investing in community. Another example is mental health care, kind of investing in mental health care. I'm going to answer that because so if I'm missing something, if someone could speak up, I'm kind of skimming the chat, but I want to acknowledge, I also want to say that if we haven't commented on your chat here, it still is being recorded. And so again, that's the value of 6 listening sessions. All of this chat information, all of the these conversations, there's a note taker, they're being captured, even if we're not able to verbally capture it right here. I see another comment on housing, right, to support community support. So ways that I want to hear is build a strong community and put those funds there. That's what I'm seeing.
I'd like to speak to what Barbara has shared, if she's okay with that. She's shared that she her interaction with the police and her feeling that she would feel more comfortable if that had been recorded, and that she's okay with funding being allocated for body-worn cameras for the sheriff's office. And so I want to speak to that a little bit, because I want to recognize that there is value in recording interactions with the police. We have seen that. We know that we didn't get the body camera of George Floyd's murder, but we did get bystander camera footage of that, right? And that's the reason why we've had this uprising and this movement in the last 5 months, is because that was captured on camera and it was shared around the world, and people rightfully were outraged by it and decided that we need to do something. So there is absolute value in getting place interactions on film. I think one of the concerns I have, in addition to just that's a very large amount of money, again, going to police when we are already over policed, is that I think we've seen a greater shift with publicly filmed interactions with police, the public filming versus actual body camera footage, because body camera footage is under the control of that policing organization, right? And there typically are, I can't quote exactly, but there are typically rules, right, about they get 48 hours or something to view the footage, and and before it gets released, and then sometimes it doesn't get released for months. There have been cases where it hasn't been released for months, and so that allows for narratives to be controlled by the police, and if you so if we don't see it, we don't necessarily know. And I will say this, this is the honest truth. Police lie all the time. They are allowed to lie legally. They are allowed to lie to you. They are, it is just a part of it. So like, I have a mistrust in what the police put out as their narrative. So yeah, having a video of what actually happened can be really helpful. But I do not think it's helpful when the policing organization has the control over that footage. And and I think that that one of the things that I think a lot of people are saying in here is, if we minimize police interactions with people by decreasing, the amount of policing that occurs, we have less need for that, right? If we have somebody who could have gone to Barbara, who, like she said, like I mean, it's part of the police officers, but that mental health, whatever, I can't remember what that's called, who would go out and interact with her, who are trained and specialized in that. You're decreasing that.
Thank you. I'm gonna interject just for a moment, Sarah, just because our time's short, and I see Karen return to the room.
Yes, sorry.
And so Karen, I'd like to give you a moment. You're on mute, so you'll wanna unmute so we can hear you.
Okay, thank you, sorry. So I'm a parent of an adult son with co-occurring disorders, mental health issues, and addiction. And my son has lived in Washington County his whole life, where I have advocated for years for treatment for him. He has been treatment resistant, but he finally received mental health treatment when he committed a crime and went to prison. So I'll spare you the details of my son's life, but I want to say a few things. We talked about defunding the police and reallocating those funds to mental health services and addiction. And but I also want to and Catherine, Commissioner Harrington, I'm going to send you this, and Kevin Moss, this in written detail, so you have this, and I hope it is included in these comments. But I know you don't have you have budgetary control over the sheriff's office, but we must catch all these people who are in continuous contact with the police, who are arrested, who are held short term in the jail, and who are not captured in or there enough to receive services. They must all be seen by a medical and mental health professional. And once released, often they are just handed a pamphlet and with a list of services and told, here, go and find these. We can't do that. They're not capable of doing that for themselves. We have to have wraparound services for all of these folks. We have to, and there has to be follow through. Not only wrap around and following them through, but there has to be a long-term follow through to ensure that they get these services that they need. And also, I want to, the Washington County made me, after years of revolving door entry into the jail in Washington County and other jails in the metropolitan area, Washington County finally got a clue that it is cheaper to make me my son's guardian, to pay for that, than to continue this revolving door when he doesn't take his medication, is treatment resistant, doesn't take his medication, and decompensates and commits a crime and is picked up. We need to appoint guardianship for these folks who need it. It's so much cost effective, and it's so much, and it ensures that these people are receiving the help that they need. So why aren't we doing this more often in Washington County? Another thing I have on my list that I'm going to say, Sequoia Mental Health Services, Lukdorf, LifeWorks Northwest, they must be held accountable. Their funding from the county must be based on measured, positive, and successful outcomes. And I don't know I know there's reports. I don't know who's receiving them, who's reading them, and but You know, my son has been in Washington County for 20 years. He is on the highest level of care, and I do not know what the hell that is, because I do not see the services that I think the highest level of care in Washington County should be. I'm doing everything for him, and I'm trying to step away, and I just do not know what this is, what this means, what this wraparound service means in Washington County. Who is minding the store in Washington County? And this is 20 years based on my 20 years experience.
Thank you.
Another thing, House Bill 3224 was passed by the legislature last year, and it requires Oregon district attorneys to create policies for the core functions of their office and make them available to their public. And I believe by the end of this year, the DAs must have a website that is transparent and accountable to the public. I want to ensure that specific information about prosecuting people with, especially with mental illness and addiction, is included on that website. Right now, I just learned that my son is a defendant in a grand jury hearing. I'm his guardian. I'm his mother. He has no clue. I have no clue. And you know, from what I understand, if a grand jury indicts him, he is just, you know, a warrant is issued and he is whisked away to the Washington County jail, and we don't know what the hell is happening. You know, how traumatizing is this for people with mental illness? Oh my God. And one more thing, the Oregon jails reduced their populations by 50% to stop the spread of COVID-19. And those with low-level nonviolent crimes or who were awaiting trial were released. If they could be released without risk to public safety, why were they in jail in the first place? Now, I understand Disability Rights Oregon has some recommendations. I do have this in my letter to you, but I would like you to look at these also. If we can do this, if we can release people safely during a pandemic, why were they in jail in the first place? And I'll let you read my letter later. Thank you so much. I'm so frustrated with mental health services in Washington County.
I can hear that, and I can hear it's something you've been living with as you are the guardian for your son. So thank you for sharing. And it does sound like you've captured that in a letter too. So if there's anything else you want to add, the chat box again is something that's public record. I mean, it's public record, and it will all go to the county commissioners following this session. I also, we're at time. The other group has come back, so thank you. I do want to.
I've actually had my hand raised for a pretty long time.
Okay. Apologies for that. Yeah, go ahead. And then there's one other comment.
I know.
From the
Zoom
chat
is a lot to keep track of.
Okay, go ahead.
So I just first wanted to explain what defunding means, because that's coming up a lot. And so there's a spectrum of what people mean when they say defunding the police, but the minimal first step that everyone on the spectrum agrees on is that defunding the police just means taking a large portion out of the overinflated police budget and reinvesting it in community services that will, one, prevent crime in the first place, and two, leave people less vulnerable to police harassment and brutality. The other point I wanted to make is, I know I've been speaking at every single one of these, and it's not because I think my voice is important. It's because I think that the county has framed this conversation in a way that erases the voices of Black, Indigenous, and people of color communities. And so that's why I keep coming back, because I'm hoping that the next time I come, that won't be the case, but it has been every time. And I'll give you examples, because I'm frustrated by that. I'm frustrated by the erasure of things that have already been said and presented and communicated to the county. So, they mentioned very briefly at the beginning that Reimagine Oregon and the community reinvestment proposal both went out to the county before these listening sessions, and that was the catalyst. I think it's important to note that they did not do that the first 3 sessions. I think they only did that because I was bringing it up every time. Maybe not, I don't know. Maybe they were always planning to just finally bring it up at the 4th one. They also don't share the links that show what those community organizations said. All they say is that those community organizations said that they're not so excited about body-worn cameras. They not only said that and provided research as to why body-worn cameras are ineffective, they also very explicitly call for defunding the sheriff's office and give very good explanations as to why that would be best for the communities as well. And again, I'm happy to put it in the chat again, but that's over a dozen community-based organizations that are led by and advocate for Black and Indigenous and people of color communities. Also, just things I've noticed, the chair say, I've heard her say, oh, these listening sessions are the starting point, not the ending point. Again, that's erasing what community organizations of color have already communicated to the county. So these listening sessions are absolutely not the starting point. They're actually just—
Rena, I'm going to have to interrupt you. This is Jake, the facilitator. I just need to move the meeting along. Can you wrap up in the next 10 seconds?
Yes, you're absolutely right. And also, she's also said that not all people of color are against body-worn cameras, which is a really bizarre statement that is true because anything you say with not all people of color is going to be true. So that's why we're really frustrated that only some things are being heard and taken seriously. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Rena. So welcome back, everyone. I appreciate you taking the time to stick with us this evening and participating in a robust conversation. And from what I'm gathering, both of the breakout rooms, we're going to just take a minute and report back to the commissioners who are with us in the main room here. I'll ask for Elaine to go ahead and start with the breakout room. Elaine, if you're talking, you might be on
Elaine.
There you are. Elaine, you're muted.
Right, you got it. There were a lot of great personal stories, a lot of passion, a lot of grave concerns that were shared, and Shushmita took a lot of notes. We kept her very busy. Some of the themes were just the housing and
effective
support services, not only access to services, but accountability in that as well. And maybe I'll let Melissa and Shushmita add to that.
Hi, I'll go up first. So I cannot fully capture or express the anguish and trauma of a parent, of a medical specialist, of somebody working in the judicial system, and a veteran and other community members. But it was also mentioned that from somebody who works in the judicial system, that officers, while videos currently not necessarily are edited, but officers can choose to turn on and off, mute, turn away, lean, or forget. And so it's selective choice whether the cameras are turned on or off. And they also use code words so that the conversation is not picked up or it is muted. It was mentioned that police act with impunity and that killing or abuse of power is not punished. And people are done, and they are demanding defund of police so that we can invest in the public, because public is in crisis. People have mental health addiction, they're sent to jail, and changes need to start and put funds where it is needed. Where if people, we also have to understand that if people are incarcerated for, especially if they have disabilities, and or mental health, and if they are incarcerated, they also lose their any support, government support that they get, which is food, housing, transportation. There is no support if they get incarcerated. After that, there is no support coming out of jails or aftercare. if and if anybody is in continuous contact with police, they must receive more care, because it's not a revolving door where people should be picked up and released. And just handing people a piece of paper for the Hawthorne Mental Health Services is not enough. They need to be taken there. They need to have somebody following up. The highest, if we say that we provide our community members with the highest level of care, what does that truly mean? It needs to be defined. And if a parent who has already been taking care of the child for so long it doesn't have the information, then nobody else does. The treatment, people who have, that not all crimes are treated equally, and that petty instances are accounted for, but something as big as a drug exchange was not taken into consideration, and only the teenager was spoken to while the parents were left to sleep at 11:15 in the night, until the community member put themselves at risk and had to address the parents who did not get any follow-up call from the law enforcement about a drug exchange or drug sale to another teenager. And that's about it. I hope I've captured everything. Melissa, please feel free to follow up.
Hi. Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. Thank you.
All right, thank you, all three of you, so much for reporting out from your breakout. Really appreciate that. Adele, do you want to get us started on our conversation in the main room, and I can add to it if anything comes to mind?
Sure. Yeah, I'll get started here. Our focus was body-worn cameras, and I'd say the majority of the conversation, and we heard, or the majority of the conversation really was a case against body-worn cameras and the concern that they were representing more of the police and the institution. It was owned by the police body, and that they could be turned on or off, or the cameras could, and that also there's research that shows, or enough statistics that show, that crime still happens, or not crime, excuse me, assaults still happen when a camera is worn. So there was a lot of conversation around that. There was some suggestion of looking at really taking the funds for body-worn cameras and using them to fund community services, and looking at Reimagine Oregon and some other initiatives. There was also a comment by a woman who was a person of color who had been assaulted by a police officer and had taken it to court and was wishing that there had been camera footage, and so she was speaking in, voicing a desire for body-worn cameras. We heard from one person who is the parent of someone living with disabilities, and who was really expressing some frustration with the way the system is working. So I'm sure that there are other comments that, Jake, could you take it from there and kind of summarize?
Yeah, the only thing I would add is that there was a mention of looking at cahoots as a model, and just a very, very robust conversation around what community supports for people with disabilities look like and the need for that. So Rania or Shane, anything you wanted to add from the conversation, or? All right, hearing none. Thank you so much, Adele, for that great summary. I think that was a fantastic recap of a robust conversation, even though it's impossible to capture it all in just a few minutes. All right.
I would just like to
Well,
one last time ask the Board of Commissioners to come together on a climate session, listening session, especially in concerns to the climate crisis. We talk about a lot of like the infrastructure that we need to reinvest in. So yeah, we're gonna need to reinvest in like local economies and local food systems and
Pedro.
local textile mills. So yeah, to fund the police and fund climate resilient
Thank you,
communities.
Pedro. Sorry, we're just about out of time, and we've got one more thing to get through before we wrap up tonight. So sorry to have to interrupt you. I really am. Thank you. We're just, since we've got just a minute left, we really would like to go ahead and launch the 2 polls you saw at the beginning of the meeting once again to help the county and the staff in particular, and folks who are on this call, see how you're thinking about this issue after having the opportunity to listen. So the first poll is up. Again, it is, how do you feel about equipping all law enforcement with body-worn cameras? Your options are strongly agree, agree, not sure, disagree, and strongly disagree. All right. Last chance if you want to weigh in. All right. The poll results are up. 43% of folks said strongly disagree. 21% said strongly agree. And 0 folks said agree, which is a significant shift from before, which was, I believe, 13% previously. So interesting results. Can we go ahead and launch the second poll then? All right, the question is, I believe body-worn cameras, and again, you can pick as many of these as you would like. Quick reminder, someone asked that question at the beginning. And your options are intrude upon the privacy rights of residents, promote accountability and transparency to the public and serve in training and evaluation of personnel, help provide compelling evidence in criminal prosecutions, unnecessarily increase police budgets, require trust in the police to turn on cameras when engaging with community, can produce video that is edited to misrepresent or distort the situation being filmed. Last chance, everybody. We're going to close the poll in just a moment here. I know there's a lot of questions there, though. All right, I'm not seeing the numbers move anymore, so let's close that. Thank you, everybody, for participating in that. The results were that, let's see, any big shifts in particular? We saw an increase in the number of folks who said it requires trust in the police to turn on the camera when engaging with the community. And I believe an increase as well in the last item. Can produce a video that is edited to misrepresent or distort the situation filmed. So thank you, everybody, for participating in those. I know those will be valuable contributions to the county and to the staff who are on the call. Thank you. Before I close, I just want to remind the facilitators and the support staff to stay in the room after the official meeting is over so we can conduct a quick debrief. I also want to thank all of you, the people of Washington County, who showed up to participate in this really important discussion. I'm so grateful for your participation. Your input is a very valuable part of this county's process and very valuable part of today's session. Lastly, I want to thank the team who facilitated, to Elaine and Adele, and those who took notes, Shein, Shushmita, and Michelle, and those who helped to facilitate the chat room, Rania, Melissa, and Glenn. Thank you so much. We want to thank our Spanish language interpreter, Victor, and ASL interpreters, Mary and Christy. Chair Harrington, before we close, would you like to offer any final remarks?
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate Disability Rights Oregon for working with us. This is the first time that we've taken a affinity group approach to our community engagement like this. And so I'm really grateful for your expertise and that of the facilitators who have helped us here this evening. As mentioned, the contractors who we've hired to help us go through our first ever listening session like this will be taking all of the input from the 6 different listening sessions and compiling that into a report. That report needs to be available to us days before the presentation on September 22nd at a board work session. And then the board will have the opportunity to ask some further questions. And then we are anticipating coming to a decision as we noted when we were contemplating the budget allocation back the end of June. So thank you again, everyone, for exercising your voice and spending your valuable evening with us. And I also want to thank Commissioner Jerry Willey for the introductory comments and for participating tonight, as well as Commissioner Dick Scouten. And I'm not sure on the iPhone if Commissioner Rogers was able to join us tonight or not. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Have a good evening, everyone.